Scene one, Apple, take one.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shane Borza. Welcome to Film Notes. This is the show where I talk to people in the industry about the industry. I'm really excited to break out of technical film stuff and just talk to a performer and person who does various projects today, who's also another local, which I'm excited about getting more into the Vegas community. This is my good friend, Dani Weitman, who is both a performer in multiple genres, but also a somatic revitalization coach. And she has a program specifically for performers. So I'm really excited to talk about not only her performance, but how she works with people who do performance. So welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I've been wanting to talk to you for a while now, not only so that we can showcase what you do, because I do think it's really important for people, but also what you do as far as the performance that you do and how maybe that has informed your practice, so to speak.
Definitely. Yeah.
Before we dive into any background, talk to me a little bit about, performer. Like, what's that mean? What do you do?
So I've been a dancer my entire life, first and foremost. And so now I've been dancing for 30 years. But so it's been, as a performer, I am a dancer first and foremost, but I am such a creative at the end of the day that I dabble a little bit in different genres of performance. So right now I'm actually pursuing more singing. So that's the next venture I've been exploring and tying that in with dance. And then on top of it, I do a lot of creative projects. So a lot of creative films that incorporate dance, that incorporate sound, that incorporate a little bit of acting, and just for visual purposes. So it's a little bit of everything, and it's exciting. I love it.
The other half of this is your practice,
Mhm.
Somalite, which is the somatic revitalization part. If people don't know either one of those terms, much less them together, could you explain kind of in a nutshell what somatic revitalization is?
Yeah, absolutely. So somatic work is essentially the connection to your internal body. So the internal awareness that you have of your body. And the revitalization part of it is basically it's the renewal of that connection to your body. So where you can start to feel a sense of safety to your body and your expression. And what that looks like is movement, breath, mindfulness, and awareness to how your body is responding to stressors or daily triggers that we might embark and experience. But essentially, with somatic revitalization work, it is a matter of bringing your body into the present. So if we've experienced a lot of trauma, whether it's emotional, physical, or even if we have a lot of self-limiting beliefs, we might be living in the past, and our body's experience may be in the past versus in the present and feeling safe. And my job is to really work with clients to empower them to reclaim that sense of agency in their body and also expressing their authenticity and not feeling a sense of limitation in that expression. So that's what I do in working with clients, is really empowering them to feel that sense of connection back into their body. And it's explored through movement, through dance, through breath work, through mindfulness. And I coach them to really understand how their body wants to express itself without the fear and the limitations from the past coming into the present.
I'm going to dive a little more into that later, but to step back, you mentioned you've been dancing over 30 years. Yeah. So tell me how you got started in performance and if that has changed or morphed over time. Like you mentioned, you're getting more into singing, for instance, and that's something that is a through line with a lot of people I talk to where they'll say, Well, I started off acting and I was in front of the camera, but now I'm doing more filmmaking and I'm behind the camera. So it is very common for people to kind of shift roles, especially in the kind of the creative arts, regardless of which one it is.
Right. Yeah, so I started performing. I think I came out of the womb performing, honestly. But from the time I was a little kid, I mean, I would put outfits together and I would sing and dance in front of my family. And I just always had this urge to perform. And I remember even my dad had built this patio outside, and I would literally stand on the patio and I would perform for my neighbors, and I was just singing and dancing, and I just always loved it. And so my mom signed me up for dance, and I started at 3 years old, and I just absolutely loved it. I was just such a performer and enjoyed dancing, and so dance followed me all the way. I went to college for dance. That's what I got my degree in. I went to a performing arts high school, so it was always just dance, and that was my first love. But I will tell you that I always wanted to pursue singing. I always had this like passion for singing, and as a kid, as I said, I would sing all the time. But then as I got older, I started to hide it, and I would suppress the desire to sing. And even when auditions would come up, I would sit there and I was like, I want to do it so bad, but I would let my anxiety and my limiting beliefs stop me. And so I never pursued it, but I would secretly sing all the time at home, in the car. And probably within the last year, that itch to start singing was like, why aren't we doing this? Like, we've been dancing, and that's been the thing I've always done. But the other part of it that I've always yearned to really go after and never did finally came to the forefront and was like, okay, let's do this thing. So within the last few months, I finally just dove into it and I started vocal training. And so the fusion of dance and song has been really fun to see how I can play with those two pieces. And I'm really just excited to see where it takes me and how it unfolds. I'm just enjoying the process of it. Yeah.
I was just thinking like, oh, it's officially 15 years ago now, because 2010, I went to film school, or that's when I started. But it was in Australia. And when you're younger, you're working with people at the beginning of their career, they're kind of figuring out like what they're going to do. And before I left in 2012, I ended up working with someone who they were like just at the cusp of like starting to get things happening, and they already had a team. And one of the things they talked about is like, I need a nutritionist, and I need a trainer, and I need a publicist, and I need a manager, and I need all these different people to help me with all these different aspects of my life so that I can be successful. But it was only really in the last few years, post, I think, pandemic, that more of this like self-care in service of whether it's performing well at like a desk job or performing well on some kind of a stage or production. It is a lot of that inner stuff that needs to be developed, because we aren't going to be able to do the thing if the anxiety is getting in the way.
Yes.
So I'm really glad that you're not only allowing yourself to like blossom and allow yourself to do some of those things you want to do, because that does get in the way of people doing stuff, but also helping other people do that. So tell me a little bit about how you became the person who learned this and then now teach it. Is it something that started off because you're like, you needed it, or did someone else like introduce this to you? How did that get started?
It's definitely been an interesting journey to get to where I am today. Going back to when I was talking about just even having anxiety with singing, something that happened with me as a dancer, and I think a lot of dancers can understand this too. There's so much pressure on body image, and there's a pressure to look a certain way. And so what started to happen throughout my dance journey was that I found myself really just never feeling good enough. I never felt that I was talented enough. I would basically self-sabotage myself constantly. And that probably started, I would say, maybe even in middle school, because I can recall like just feeling insecure in my body. And it progressed through high school where I was always dancing. I was still pursuing it, but I kept beating myself up. And so I ended up developing a lot of different eating disorders and anxiety and just limiting beliefs. And so it really took away my joy of dance, because it was this like competitiveness of like, I have to be perfect. I have to be perfect. And so that just debilitated me through pretty much from high school, even through college and years after. And what I started to find was that my passion for dance and for being a creative really got minimized, because it was just all about this perfectionist mindset and needing to prove myself. It's like, I need to show you how good I am. And it's like, and that's not why we create in the first place. We do it because it brings us joy. And so I became a dance teacher after I graduated college, and I started to see, and working with all of these talented kids and just amazing human beings, like that they would beat themselves up. And I would see them kind of falling into similar patterns with certain things. And I wanted to help empower them. And so I started to really look at strength training to get them stronger, and to also to feel more empowered in their bodies. So aside from teaching dance at that point, I got into personal training and bodybuilding. And that was also to help me overcome these disordered body image patterns, and to try and really look at strength instead of like, how skinny can I be? And that completely kicked off this whole other journey of self-awareness and wellness. And so I pursued bodybuilding and personal training, and I dove head into that. And it was amazing to see this sense of resilience that the body has, and also just how much I could be dedicated, really rewire the way that my brain sees myself. And so it became more about strength. I was still dealing with a lot of insecurities amidst all of that, and still kind of fighting this internal battle of not feeling good enough. And a lot of trauma from my past and a lot of things kind of came to the surface. And I finally got to the point where I was like, I need to figure out how to resolve what's underneath. And I was like, everything that I'm doing is so body focused, which is wonderful, because now I can strengthen my body and really work it. But I also have this turmoil underneath. So then I started to dive into Reiki energy healing, and I wanted to explore energy and understanding how energy works and how it impacts the body, and how these belief systems are, so impactful to our mind. And so I spent a few years really diving into Reiki and personal development. And I really dove into like the spiritual side of things and understanding how all of this manifests. And so fast forward, so it was years of bodybuilding and personal training, and then Reiki. And so now we're looking at around 8 years of this, like diving in and exploring. And to piece it all together, I wanted to really understand emotions, and how, when I would get anxiety, or I was depressed, or I was experiencing certain aspects of my life, how it was showing up in my body and how that was impacting me. And so the final piece was to really look into somatic work, which is the internal perspective of the body. So then I started doing research on somatics. And the funny piece of it is that I had done so many somatic courses in college in dance. I had taken private one-on-one sessions with, it's called Alexander Technique. I had done a private semester with her. And so it was like, everything kind of just came full circle. And I would sit in my room with books about the body, about energy, about somatics. And I'd go back and forth and find all these correlations. And I was like, this is so cool. And so then anyway, it all kind of came back to dance again, and just movement, and this exploration of the overlap of emotions and anatomy and energy. And so, make a long story short, that's been my journey, has been to really dive into these facets of the mind, body, and spirit, and how they all work together holistically. And that's where I am today.
How have you seen some of those things come together for either yourself in like a performance way, or maybe someone that has been a client of yours? They're trying to do some kind of performance or some kind of a show, and there's a block, and you're able to, and again, that could be you or it could be a client you work with, but you use these techniques to then enable that performance to happen. Can you give an example of that?
I can personally relate to an experience that I had, and then I have plenty of clients that have had their own profound impacts as well, and I'll share with that too. Well, first and foremost, amidst all of this research, I took a hiatus from performing altogether. Like I would basically just do online videos and things like that, but it was me kind of hiding away. So I stepped away for almost 8 years from performing. And finally, this past year, I made the decision, because I did all this work. I was like, I really want to step back into performing again. So I got myself back into the dance studio. And I think one of the biggest realizations was that my joy came back. My sense of presence came back. And I was able to no longer take a class with the mindset of, well, how am I doing in comparison to everybody else? Or am I good enough? Or am I standing out? And this and that. And it was just this sense of, I can feel my body in the experience. Like I'm aware of my breath as I'm in class. I'm aware of how much effort I'm putting into something. And if I'm pushing harder than I need to try and prove something, like all of that work made me recognize how much effort I needed to put into something and why. So that was kind of a big shift for me, and that I've seen as a breakthrough. And even with my clients, it's like, to want to pursue certain creative endeavors, but to have that limitation in your mind of saying, well, it's not good enough, or it's only going to be able to, like, I can only put it out there if people love it or if they like it. And it's like, they would get to this realization of, no, but I love it. Like, I like this. This feels good for me. And it's like also playing into that inner child of like really nourishing that part of ourselves that just wants to have fun and express. And it's not for any other purpose except it's fun and we enjoy it. And if it resonates with people, wonderful. And if it doesn't, then that's okay too, because that's not always the meaning behind it. And so to see people that have cut off their creative expression because of fear of judgment, and then to work on regulating their system to where they can actually hear their inner voice again. They can hear, their soul basically calling them to pursue these certain creative endeavors and to do it just because it feels good. And then to actually feel how healing it is to do it. So it's definitely come across in my world and for my clients as well. Mm-hmm.
And when you talk about the, impact, and it can be on both sides. Like it could be something getting in the way, or it could be we dive really deep into something and we kind of sometimes get stuck in that. So, you think of people who are like, quote unquote, method, mm-hmm. and they get into a character or a role, or even, we watch a lot of the dance competition shows, and you see people, they'll do a performance and it has a very, heavy message, or it is very much of a certain emotion, and they're just like almost distraught afterwards because it brings up so much. Mm-hmm. And, when you're performing, you have to be able to like turn that on and turn it off and not like be stuck in it. Yeah. Because it can very much be something you get in and can't get out of.
Right.
So is that something that you have found this type of somatic work is helpful for as well? Or is it only for like a specific thing, like, oh, I have this block and I need someone to help me with it?
I think in many ways it can work with so many different aspects, because I think one of the biggest pieces is that with somatic work, you start to familiarize yourself with every part of who you are. And so you're no longer judging the internal experience of what's coming up. You're no longer saying like, oh, well, this part of me is bad anymore. It's just, it's an aspect of you. And to be able to feel that sense of comfortability to express that part of you and to be with that part of you without judgment, I think that really translates into the artistic expression, because then you're no longer shying away from any part of you, and yet you're not letting it become all consuming. Because when we look at somatic work, the whole purpose of it really is to be with what is and allow the emotions and feelings to pass through like a storm versus sitting and getting stuck in it. So I think as a creative, one of our roles as creative individuals is to be able to channel what we're experiencing from an emotional standpoint and give it life in a creative way. And if we can get to that space where we're no longer fearing grief, we're no longer fearing maybe some of the heavier stuff, but yet we've been so in touch with it that it's no longer this all-encompassing thing, I think that's when we are able to go into a space of expressing it, letting it have its own life, and then leaving it and saying, okay, that's a part of me. I don't have to let it consume me anymore. So I think, to answer your question, the somatic work definitely helps with that. And it also helps with just the overall sense of breaking through those blocks and those limiting beliefs as well. Mm-hmm.
Sorry to stop the show, but we've got some bills to pay around here. And to do that, I wanted to point out a couple things I've got on offer at shaneborza.com. As both a master level mental health coach and an award-winning filmmaker, I have the experience and expertise to help you go further faster, regardless of whether that is in your production or life. I am psyched to announce all my courses and books have been updated and expanded and are available on both Apple Books and at my shop. Especially wanted to point out my Film Notes book and workbook, where you can learn everything you need to make your film and get it out to the world. If you need help with either your life or film, please reach out. And now, back to the show. I always say that one of my favorite type of people to talk to is like a multi-hyphenate. And so when you talk to more of like a quote unquote filmmaker person, you know, the joke is like, oh, they're a triple threat. They're like a writer, director, producer, or writer, director, actor, or writer, director, editor, or something. It is lots of different hats within a certain thing. And you're kind of doing that again on the performer side. You know, you're like dancing and you're singing and you're doing this and you're doing that. So talk to me a little bit about how those either overlap or differentiate. Like, are they satisfying these entirely separate interests? Are you finding that they're all just like different versions of the same expression? Like I've never, other than doing stunt work, I always say like, I've never done any acting. I'm never in front of the camera unless there's like an action thing to do. Because one of the people that I learned from said about doing stunt work, he's like, I just have to make it look right. I don't have to feel anything. So it's very easy for them, as long as they're fit enough to be like, let's go again, they can just physicalize the movement, but they're not emotionally necessarily in the like, so your motivation is you hate this person because they killed your wife and you have to, like, he just has to make it look right. And I literally watched him be like, I'm in the middle of a joke, or we're about to go, I'll tell you the punchline in a moment. Do the thing and go. So anyway, then the guy says, because emotionally he's not in it. He just has to look a certain way.
Right.
And so I don't know, and that's why I love talking to performers, like that building of the performance internally and connecting and then showing and then all of that stuff. So when you talk about going from dancing to not dancing, or allowing yourself to be a singer now, like how are you navigating through all those different methods of performance?
I think for me, it is, and this might sound kind of silly, but I think it's so driven by my soul. Like it's so energetically driven for me. And whenever I'm dancing, you know, even if I take class or I've performed for choreographers, it's such a matter of like a feeling for me, where it's just, how does this show up in my body, and what does it evoke within me, and how does it impact my energy? And I think for me, it's such a way to express what maybe words can't, or how do I put this? Like, it's even hard to explain it in words. It's just such a beautiful experience is the best way to describe it. It's like magical for me, because to be able to articulate through the body a whole story and evoke feeling, where if somebody watches it, it's like they could feel it. It resonates for them. And even with song, with singing, it's like the vibration of sound. It's like for anybody to hear music, and it's like it creates this whole all-encompassing feeling that you connect with. And so I think for me as a performer, it's about the feeling that it creates. It's so much about, like, how does my soul want to bring this to life, and how does it feel in doing so? So like when I'm singing, feeling where the vibrations are coming through my body, and how far out I want them to reach, and how does it make my body feel, and all the tingles and all the good stuff. And then like with dance, it's a very similar thing too. It's like, what is this feeling as a human that we can experience, but yet it's being told and expressed through choreography. And so I think that's a big overlap, is just the sense of like the soul's outlet to really embody all that is human. Yeah.
I recently talked to someone who acts both like live on stage, but also does film work. And we talked a lot about the similarities and difference. Of course, when you're like on a stage in front of, and it doesn't matter if you're singing or dancing or acting or anything, you have that emotional and energetic give and take, because people are there and it's all kind of like live. Whereas in film, or some kind of, or even if you're singing like in a studio, you're pulling out these moments of like, ooh, we're going to use, the third take of the fifth line of that, or, they piece together the music or what have you. And the film is all these shots, we're going to do the wide. And so people will kind of relax. But then when they do the close up, it's like, oh, we have to really bring it because the camera's right there.
Right.
So having done some different kinds of performance, especially since we're talking about this somatic piece, what are any thoughts or feelings you've had on the different like energetic types of performance, whether it's because there's a live audience or not, or because you're like in a, like if you're in a recording studio, it's like you're in your own room all by yourself, and there's like nobody else there, but you have to really tap into to bring that performance. So when people hear it on whatever, it's there. Or same in film, like 2 years from now, when this movie comes out, I really want to make sure people feel the performance, even though all I'm looking at is like a blank wall with, a bunch of lights or something. So how do you either adjust, or what do you use, or what even do you feel like, especially talking about all this inner stuff, when those things can be so different, even if you're still dancing in both or singing in both?
Yeah. Man, these are great questions. I'm loving this.
Season 4.
Yeah, I love it. So I think that one of the biggest differences would be like, and I know from personal experience too, like anytime you're performing in front of an audience, like you're saying, there's that give and take, right? And when that happens, I feel like when you're performing in front of a crowd, there can be such an adrenaline rush that it can actually, I find it can cause you to almost no longer be present in the experience, because it's kind of like, oh my God, there's so much going on, and like, this is so exciting and great, and da 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 da. And like, it's exciting, but I think that if you don't prep yourself to kind of find your neutral space, it can actually be a little bit more challenging for some performers. And so like I noticed one of the last times I did a dance performance, like I could feel that adrenaline rush and I was like, oh wow, yeah, this is really like, it's such a difference between being in a studio or like just kind of dancing alone. It's like there is more presence in the experience of that because you're just, I don't know if it's just that there's less stimuli and again, you're not having that energetic exchange as much, but I think that one of the best pieces of performing on stage is that if you can regulate your system a little bit more before you go on stage, so you can still be present, so that, yeah, you can still be excited and feel that energetic exchange, but it no longer takes you out of actually being present. Because sometimes I think when we go on stage and we perform, it's like, so it happens so fast and we're so excited that like we step off and we're like, it's done. It happened already. Like we weren't present for the experience. So I think to be able to regulate the system, whether it's through shaking practices or breathing practices prior to going on and letting your nervous system find a little bit more balance. That way, when you're performing, you're still included in the experience, right? It's not like you've left your body and it's just adrenaline is completely taking over. And when you're doing things like if you're filming or if you're behind a camera or like I said, even just dancing alone in my room or something, there's a sense of I'm that much more aware of what's happening in my body as it's happening. So I think that's kind of the difference between the two is almost like it almost feels slower in like with the external world around you versus when you're on stage, sometimes it can feel a lot more heightened and a lot more there's just a lot more energy. So to bring yourself down a little before, I think can help find that balance to where you're not so overwhelmed or inundated with adrenaline. Yeah.
Now the show's called Film Notes, so I usually ask people, what are your film notes? But let's just say, what are your notes in general? And in a couple of ways. So on one hand, it could be, my wisdom and experience has taught me these things. Maybe I wish I knew them before. These might be helpful for other people in either the somatic realm or the performance realm. And then after that, more about like the notes of if someone wanted to work with someone on the performance side or the coaching side, what might be some good notes for them to find the right person or hire someone or something like that?
One of the aspects that has been very eye-opening has been I think as performers, when we're so much in our head and we're so fixated on, like I said, the perfectionist side of it, we can really lose our why and we can lose the reason as to why we started to do this thing in the first place. And I think it can kill a lot of the joy of being a creative or a performer. So one of the biggest pieces I would say is to remember why you started it in the first place, like reflecting on that enjoyment, like really letting yourself feel the sense of presence in the experience and like that lightness that you feel in your body and that joy to be able to do this thing that you love so much. So I think that's a big piece of it, is to remember your why and to also let yourself feel in the experience of it instead of just letting the rumination of the mind take over, because I think that's what's going to take us out of the present in the experience. And no matter what medium you're performing in, I think it's also really important to recognize if you are kind of sabotaging your own efforts as an artist, and knowing, am I creating a ceiling of what's possible because I'm telling myself I can't do this thing or I shouldn't do this thing, and kind of blow the lid off of that ceiling so that you can really just explore what's possible as a creative. And with the somatic piece of it, like as you tune more into your body, you can feel safe in exploring that instead of like feeling debilitated with fear or judgment. And instead it's like, no, I feel solid in this. Like, I'm just excited to explore it. So I think that's probably one of the biggest pieces of advice and wisdom that I can share based on everything I've experienced, because you want to be able to enjoy expressing yourself and the reason why you're performing and creating, and instead of like, it has to be perfect and that's the only way that I can share it, you know? So that's definitely what I would share that for sure.
Good share. So the other part of that is some notes for people who might want to work with someone like you. And again, what that could be on, like, how do you hire a vocalist or a dancer? You know, what's the process of like that? How do you find someone? How do you know if it's the right person? Or again, working with a coach, whether it's a somatic or any other, like, how do you find a coach? How do you know if they're the right kind of coach? How do you know if you need a coach?
So I definitely think that the first part of it would be, if you've noticed yourself kind of cycling through patterns in any way, in any area of life, like whether you're a creative or just a everyday person in whatever field of work, it's like, if you notice yourself consistently hitting a wall over and over, and especially if you become aware of what that wall might be, and you're like, you know what, I don't want to keep hitting this wall. I want to break through this. I think that's the first part of it, is the recognition that I want to do something different. I need to do something different. And maybe I need a coach to help me see things differently. So I think that's the first piece, is just even admitting to yourself that you want to have change and you're ready for change, even if it's scary. In order to find the right coach, I think that one of the ways that I have personally found it to be the easiest has been going to different places where those people might be. So surrounding yourself with like-minded individuals. And I think if you are a creative, like going to events that involve dance or performance or theater or film or painting, even whatever it looks like, because when you start to surround yourself with those types of people, usually through word of mouth, somebody knows somebody. And I have personally found that when you connect through somebody that you know, I think there's a lot more trust. And when you participate in any form of coaching, and trust is the foundation of all of it. It's like, you want to resonate with that coach, you want to connect with them. And I do feel that trust is a big part of it. And so I think to be able to connect with somebody in that way, and it's like, hey, I know this person, they're wonderful, and like, you can trust that situation. I think that's a good way to align with the right coach. Otherwise, I do think that there's, of course, online resources where you can type in somatic coaches or personal development coaches, whatever it may be. Like, there's online resources, and you can see, does it seem like I resonate with this person? Like reading testimonials and kind of seeing what the feedback is. That's another way. But I do feel that if it's something you've never embarked upon before, kind of being in an environment where you can connect with others that share that goal, I think would be the most useful. Yeah.
And to piggyback on that, where can people see some of your work, both the performance and the coaching?
So for coaching, they can go to somalight.org. And if they go to my website, they'll see all of the different coaching options that I offer. And I offer both virtual options, so if they're not local, and then I also have an office location as well that they can come to, and we can do one-on-one sessions there. I do also offer workshops. So if someone wants to do more of a class setting or have a group of people, I offer those as well. I do those at my office and a few other locations around Las Vegas, which are all listed on my website. Performance-wise, I'm going to be performing with my BC Music is her name, Billy Cole. She's my vocal coach. And so I'm going to be performing at the Martin Luther King Day Parade. We're going to be singing and performing for that. So that's like my next performance that's coming up. But otherwise, performance, I'm working on some creative film. I'm working on a couple of different collaborations with other dancers and performers. And so we're in the rehearsal stages of that and seeing where where that takes us, and we're hoping to travel and perform at different venues. But yeah, definitely all of the information you can find on my website.
And is there anywhere else you'd like to have people like connect or follow you, like social stuff or anything like that?
They can find me on Instagram at Soma Light Las Vegas. And so that's where you'll find a lot of my somatic work and workshops that are coming up. I also have a YouTube channel as well, and that is under Soma Light LLC. And on that channel, they can find free classes, meditations. They can also find different little tidbits of information that I share regarding things like creativity and somatic work and understanding the body. So it's a nice free resource for people that are looking for more information as well. Mm-hmm.
If you're just listening to the show, this is a YouTube show. So I always encourage people to go watch it, because not only can they see the guests, but they'll get to see like when people talk about things, I put them up on the screen. So I always want to make sure people can see what people are talking about, see people doing the performance, see the poster for the movie or see a picture of the thing or what have you. Mm-hmm. Well, I really want to thank you for being here and talking not only about what you do as a performer and the different ways that you do that and express yourself, but also the ways you're helping people do that for themselves. Because as you mentioned, a lot of this stuff, whether it's external or internal, it can get in our way. Definitely. Yeah. Well, I'm excited that I have been able to share this with you. So thank you for having me. I've thoroughly enjoyed this experience. Yeah, of course. Well, I'll look forward to connecting with you again shortly, because some of those collaborations are between us, which I'm excited of us working together. For everyone listening, like I mentioned, this show's on YouTube. So if you're watching, thank you. Please like, subscribe, share, all the things. And if you're just listening to this, please share the podcast with someone. It's on all the podcast platforms. And as a reminder, this show comes out monthly, and this is season 4, like I mentioned. So if you like what you heard today and you want to hear more, please dive into the back catalog. There's lots of interesting people doing lots of cool stuff. We'll see you all on the next episode. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to support the show, please click on the link below. You can also contact me at my website if you have any questions about filmmaking or anything else. Off to the side, you'll see a couple of my books, Film Notes and the Film Notes Workbook. I encourage you to check those out if you'd like to learn more about filmmaking. See you in the next episode.
Scene 1, Apple, take 1.